Brokeback Mountain is a film set in the Midwest from the 1960s to the 1980s, beginning in 1963. The movie stars are two cowboys, Ennis Delmar, played by Heath Ledger, and Jack Twist, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. They are both hired to live on Brokeback Mountain, Wyoming, and tend to the sheep for the summer. One night, after heart-to-hearts and whiskey, they choose to sleep together in the tent, but don't actually get much sleep. Being in the silence and solitude of the mountains, the two bask in their privacy and they grow together in emotional and sexual intimacy. The summer ends a bit abruptly and both men go back home to continue life without each other. Ennis marries Alma that November and they grow their family with their first daughter soon after. While rodeoing in Texas, Jack meets Lorene, a wealthy cowgirl and businesswoman, and they soon marry and have a child together. 4 years after their summer on Brokeback, Ennis receives a postcard from Jack, who he tells Alma is just a fishing buddy. Jack visits and they spend a couple nights in a motel together, which reminds them of how much joy and passion they have with each other. Jack offers multiple times that they should run away together, but Ennis declines again and again and cites a memory he has from his own childhood. At just 9 years old, his father showed him the corpse of a man who had been living with another man. He had been brutally murdered and mutilated. This memory, coupled with the modern dangers of being queer in the Midwest, are the primary motivating factors for Ennis refusing to lead a life with Jack, along with internalized homophobia. They spend very limited time together throughout the next decade or so, with Alma secretly knowing about the affair and later divorcing Ennis. Jack grows increasingly frustrated with Ennis's stubbornness and denial, and they have a fight at their last meetup. After promising to meet in November, about half a year or more in advance, Ennis learned that Jack has died. Under the impression that his cause of death was from a car maintenance accident, it is actually revealed to the viewer that Jack was murdered, which more than likely would have been a hate crime. Ennis visits Jack's childhood home, takes back a Jack of his, and speaks with his parents, who don't let him take Jack's ashes to Brokeback Mountain where he wanted them to be scattered. The movie concludes with Ennis's daughter, Alma Jr., announcing her marriage to her dad, who upon her departure looks at the jacket he took from Jack's room and is brought to tears.
The roles and restrictions of mid-20th century Midwestern masculinity are made apparent through the journey of Ennis and Jack's relationship, in which a gay partnership was never before explored so deeply in emotional and sexual aspects. So what really was holding Ennis back from openly loving Jack? Deeply entrenched toxic masculinity, or the stigma and fear? The film itself was way ahead of its time, hitting theaters in 2006 when many films featuring queer characters were portrayed as exuberant in their queerness. Feeding stereotypes of feminized gay men was wholly challenged by this film, in which the main characters are both queer and masculine. By portraying possibly the most masculine form of the American man, white burly cowboys, as emotionally vulnerable and gay, the film pushes different narratives of queerness and masculinity. Although the film challenges traditional heterosexual forms of masculinity, the pair are still heavily bound by American norms of such. Both men treat their wives as subordinates and are typically aggressive in their sexual encounters. Ennis in particular lashes out with violence or threats when confronted with the emotional strain of being queer in a homophobic society. In The Missing Discourse About Gender and Sexuality in the Social Studies, Margaret Smith Krakow asserts that the process of socializing boys into men in this culture promotes what are considered to be virtues of aggression and toughness. Boys need alternative images of masculinity if they are to resist the narrow gender role prescriptions that, along with other societal factors, can lead to violent behavior. Krakow is describing the socialization of young boys into heteronormative, tough men, in which Ennis and Jack were brought up in. If they were given alternative images of queer men, regardless of their flamboyancy, perhaps the level of violence and aggression that they displayed to others and each other would be different. As a result of their rigid masculine upbringing and expectations, however, they lash out without proper understanding of their feelings. The pain of navigating queerness, internalized homophobia, and fear of being outed is physically detrimental to Ennis's well-being, who literally almost throws up after his first goodbye with Jack. The film's balance of male vulnerability and masculinity offers a new, counter-hegemonic lens of gayness in America, especially in rigidly conservative and homophobic settings. While this film challenges traditional portrayals of queerness in America, it still upholds very hegemonic traits. The cast is completely white, with the only appearance of Mexican characters as stereotyped or fetishized. While the main characters are queer, they are cis white men, whose story has already been told far too much in mainstream media.